This episode is part of Glendale Library Arts and Cultures and the Southern California Library Cooperative's Be the Change series, which focuses on inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism.
Be the Change events will build collective understanding of systemic racism, elevate the voices and stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and inspire our community to be the change.
Hi everyone, it's Melissa.
And Desiree.
Welcome to another episode of G.E.N Talks, where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect youth to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussions.
We have a special guest, Cristina, today, who is the co-founder of Latina Media.co, where the goal is to uplift Latina and gender non-conforming Latinx perspectives in media. She is also a member of the Latino Entertainment Journalists Association and a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic. Finally, and most importantly, her abuelita made the best tamales this world has ever seen.
Thank you, Cristina, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So before we talk about LatinaMedia.co, I want to go back and talk about how you fell in love with writing. I know you mentioned in your bio you are a rehabilitated English major. So if you can also touch upon that as well.
Absolutely. So when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a writer. It was like the number one thing I always said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said, I want to be a writer. But then somewhere when I was a teenager, I decided that I could never write anything that would be good enough, right? I was never going to be like the masters that you read in literature classes and these like world famous huge books. And so I decided that I just wouldn't even try. And I think part of that was being a girl, being a Latina, sort of feeling like I didn't see myself in those places. And so it wouldn't ever be possible for me. So I tried some different things. I went into social justice. And what I found was that I majored in English. I read a lot of books. And what I found was that I was writing. I was writing a lot, but I wasn't writing as myself. I was writing as organizations. Sometimes I was writing as other people, like doing ghostwriting. And at those nonprofits, we always had this theme about finding your voice and how important that was, but I hadn't done that work myself. So when I set out to kind of do my own thing, that was a big part of it. And a big part of why I co-created Latina Media Co. was to have a space to use my own voice. And really at the very beginning, it was just to experiment to see if I had something to say. And it turned out I do. I do have something to say. I do really like writing. I find it a really powerful tool. And so that's kind of how I came into it and came back into it. And since then I've been, in the last, I want to say maybe 3 to 5 years, I've been pitching and I've been able to place stories in all sorts of different publications, from Pop Sugar to Refinery 29 to Roger Ebert. And it's been really amazing to say and be able to say and think back to my younger self to say that, you don't have to be Toni Morrison to have something important to say. It's okay to contribute in your own way.
Do you think that then that was your driving force in creating Latina Media & Co. to have a voice?
Yes, absolutely. So I had worked some in media representation space, specifically around gender, and everybody there was an ally. Everybody there wanted, women of all sorts to be able to have a voice. But I felt like the Latino community, Latinx, Latina community, wasn't well organized, where there were folks pushing for more women to be included in those spaces and perhaps for more Black folks. But I didn't see people really moving for Latinas. And, it's maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but in the United States, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, or whatever that saying is. Like, you kind of have to be loud to get it, right? Like, if you're just like waiting patiently in line, your turn might never come. So I wanted to get a little loud for my community and for myself. And so I was friends, colleagues with Nicola Schultz, another Latina, and we both were talking a lot about this and decided to do something about it, which was to create Latina Media Co., which really started off as a place for us to publish and experiment with our voices and what we had to say, and has since grown into a more robust publication that people, Latinas mostly, and Femme Latinxes publish across the nation, their thoughts about media, whether that's television, movies, podcasts, books, etc.
So your professional career is inspiring. You started in domestic violence prevention and then transitioned to working on women in politics and media. How was that switch for you, and how did you end up in each of those sectors?
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I wanted a save the world job. And I got the first one that I could find, which was at an amazing organization called Break the Cycle out there near you. And I started as the executive assistant. Like, really, it was just sort of an entry-level job at an organization I wanted to work for. And I stayed there for 8 years and rose up to the interim executive director during that period. And I learned so much. I learned how nonprofits run. I learned the positive, I learned the negative. I would say when I started there, I really believed many of the myths about domestic violence and dating violence. I think I believed that a victim was somebody who came into a relationship with low self-esteem, when now I know that that's really not the case. The relationship brings down your self-esteem. That's why you kind of see that pattern, and many of the other myths. And so I really learned a lot. And I also felt that I had grown up with feminist parents and was educated. And if anybody was going to know, it should have been me. And I didn't. So nobody knows. That's really what I thought. So I did a lot of amazing work there. And one of the things I realized is that the piece of the work that I love the most is the communications and marketing work, the branding, the storytelling. You know, you see that in Latina Media Co., and you see that actually in the work I'm doing now. And so I took that and said, like, how can I get to some of these root causes? Like, why do we have domestic violence? And I think it is because we have inequality. We have this sort of ability, this belief that some people deserve and have the right to have power over other people. And too often relationships and heterosexual relationships, that's men over women, but it also sort of filters down across our whole society. So you see the same rates in same-sex relationships and in queer relationships. You see similar rates across ethnic groups, with the differences being based off of the victim's sort of access to resources. So like if you're on an Indian tribe and you're a member of the tribe, you don't get protected from like the federal government, and those women are more likely to be victimized because abusers seek them out. They know that they have that lack of protection. But that transition for me was really about going into the root causes and using what I had learned. And it was really inspiring to see and to be able to work on women in politics and women in media. And I would say that part of that work still was in that sort of domestic violence sphere, because that is one of the outcomes, right, of those negative limiting gender norms, is really that interpersonal violence.
And you have also presented at the Women's March Convention and at the UN Nations Commission on the Status of Women. Not to mention, too, you also have had your words appear on NPR, CNN, and many other places. So what do all of these achievements mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm proud to have done those things and to have spoken and to be in those places. You know, I feel like it's a reflection of the amazing organizations I've been able to be a part of. It also feels really exciting to be in a space where maybe not a lot of other people who have my background have been able to be in. Also, you know, I have plenty of advantages. I mean, look at me, I'm like a very fair-skinned Latina. I have light eyes. Like, there is a huge privilege in that. And I've certainly been in the situation where people have assumed that like I'm the good one because of how I look, which is obnoxious. And something I try to correct them on, maybe not always as well and perfectly as I can. But to me, I think that, as I said earlier, we have to seize the mic. We Latinas and women of color need to step forward and stand in our power and organize with each other to demand more. And that I'm trying to do my part of that, not take up more space than is my due, but also, you know, to step forward and try to do that work. So I guess that's what it means to me.
So how does the team Latina Media determine what stories to write or add to the website?
That's a great question. So me and Nicola, we met this morning. We talk about what's the most important thing that's happening in media. And frankly, I wish there was more so that we would have to make more hard choices. But frankly, there aren't that many Latina shows. Queen of the South recently went off the air, and it was like the only network show that was led by a Latina, both in front of and behind the camera. So we try to make sure we're lifting all of what we would call like Latinx content. So Pose, Queen of the South, Hintified, when it comes back, Salina, those shows, like we want to make sure we're covering all of the Latinx content that maybe gets ignored in the mainstream media. That's one way. Another way is that people can contribute. We don't care if you have a degree or not, or whatever. Like, you can send us your idea. You can say, hey, I saw this show, or I saw this episode, or some of my favorite pieces have been like, I've been noticing this trend in media for a long time, and it's been bothering me about how Latinas are represented. And just send us your idea, and probably we will say yes. Like, some of the ideas are ours, but like, we love hearing from other people and being able to feature other voices. Even though there aren't a lot of Latinx shows, there are a lot of shows that have like 1 or 2 Latino characters, and we can't watch them all. So being able to run pieces on that is really exciting. So, somebody else watching HBO's Generations, for example, recently wrote a piece for us that we really loved, and wasn't a show that either Nicola or I were watching. And so that's like a place where we're really able to grow and increase our capacity when people say, hey, this is what I'm watching, I want to write this about it.
I love that. I love that you guys bring in that community aspect too, because I think sometimes some publications or whatever, they lack that. And I think you already like kind of touched upon it right now, but from when Latina Media started, I want to know your take on if you think the media has started to accurately represent the Latinas and the Latin community in general, or if there really hasn't been much.
I think media is trying, but I think we are so far away from accurate representation. You still see way too much of the stereotypes that, our men are all hyper macho and our women are all super sexy and gay folks don't exist. There's that. There's, we're more often portrayed as criminals and as people without papers, and that's like the totality of our experience. And I don't, like, listen, I loved Queen of the South. I wrote about it. We did episode recaps of it. It's a drug show, like it is. And it's not that those types of shows can't exist. Or I recently started rewatching Devious Maids, and it's like pretty fun. Right. But they're all like sexy bombshell maids. Like, it's a stereotype. Yeah. But like, that would be okay if we had a million shows. Right? Like, that is a part of our community. There's nothing wrong with being a domestic worker, and I don't want to stigmatize that. But there is something wrong with people assuming that that's the only thing that we can do. And I think for folks who are outside of our community, but even for ourselves, it's really important to be able to dream and see bigger, and the limited representation hurts that. So while there has been movement, and there are some great shows, or have been some great shows that are attempting to go bigger, I think Vida, which not a lot of people watched, it was on Stars, but it was an amazing show. Hintified is trying to do it. There are other shows that are working on creating a broader, more expansive representation, and not just showing pale complected mestizos, but also showing Black, Asian, sort of the whole indigenous range of what it actually is to be Latino. And I think there's conversations in Hollywood. The fact is that the majority of people who still hold the power and who make the decisions about who gets shows don't have a deep understanding of our community and our realities. And so when they're making decisions, they don't have the frame of reference. They're trying, they want to, I do believe that, a lot of them, but I don't believe that everybody knows really what that means. And so it's really important to get more of our folks behind the camera making the decisions. At Latina Media Co., we talk about how do you change representation, and we kind of we put it in a couple of different pillars. There's the people behind the cameras making the changes. There's the people in front of the cameras, the ones we see, the actors, the actresses. And then there's the cultural gatekeepers, the ones who are like the tastemakers. And that's the part that we work on as at Latina Media Co., trying to get more of our criticism out there, because a lot of times a movie will come out and the reviews won't be for that target community. So like Vivo, Lin-Manuel Miranda's most recent Netflix film recently came out. And the early reviews that I read, that I saw, and I watch everybody, were all by like white dudes. I was like, I don't care that you don't like this movie, or even that they didn't like it, but even that you did like it. Like, it was funny, they had the exact opposite reaction. Like there's a song in there where like the young girl Gabby raps, and like to me that was like the best moment of the movie, and they were like, why is it in the credits? I don't like this. And I was like, this isn't for you. And so like if a movie like that gets like a negative Rotten Tomato scores, and less people see it, it's less likely to get funding in the future, and on and on and on, it snowballs. And so it's important to publish other ideas about those films and to get our voices out there. And that's what we're trying to do at Latina Media Co., both publishing ourselves, but then also being a stepping stone for folks who can publish with us and then say, take that byline hopefully to a bigger publication, and say like, look, I have this clip. I'm the real deal. And, be able to grow and build. And we've actually seen a couple of people do that, which has been really exciting for us.
And what have you learned from your whole journey, specifically in starting Latina Media?
Wow, that's a big question. I think starting with Latina Media Co. is that one of the things, I wasn't sure, I guess, if we could do it, if our voice would matter, if we would be able to make the time, and like, we don't make money off of it. It's definitely a loser in terms of that for us. Our funding is grant funding. But I would say that the power and the satisfaction has been amazing. So if there is something that you are passionate about and you see a problem that people aren't fixing, either because they don't notice it or because they don't have your exact perspective. So, there has since we founded Latina Media Co. 3 years ago, a lot of amazing groups have sprouted up. Few focus on the cultural gatekeepers, and none that I know of specifically also look at gender. So are looking at women and femme Latinxes and not sort of like the whole community. So I still feel like we're doing really important work, and that we've helped. It's been small for maybe the world, but it's been huge for us, and sort of my sense of what I can do in the world and my place in it, and my kind of sense of hope for what the world can be like.
I'm a Latina, and I recently graduated from broadcast journalism. So seeing what you're doing, it's very inspiring. So yeah, I just want to take that time to tell you that.
Thank you. That is so kind.
Yeah, no problem.
It's just in a story idea. We'll probably run it.
Sounds good. But what do you hope happens for the Latin community and for Latina Media in the future?
I hope that we do the work on our community so that we can step forward in power and strength, and own the power that our numbers should bring us. So a fun fact about me, I've lived in all 4 of the border states with Mexico. And one of the things I always say to Californians about, say, Texas, is there's a lot of stereotypes maybe about what Texas is in California, is that in Texas, the people are not bad. It's actually, there's a lot of Latino folks there. There's a lot of Black folks. There's a lot of Asian folks, people of color. What is wrong is the political system that has disenfranchised so many. They have like one of the lowest voting rates because their votes are so gerrymandered. It really doesn't matter. Like, it's right. That's correct. Like, why vote? It doesn't matter. And that's obviously wrong. But I think if we look at our numbers, we should have more power. But we need to do some work internally in terms of recognizing and respecting each other based off of skin tone, based off of nationality. We have I don't think we have more prejudices than other groups, but we need to do some internal work. And I hope we can do that work so that we can really use what it means to be Latino as an organizing frame to come forward and demand what I think our shared values really are, which is about healthy families. It's about space to grow and learn and create. You know, we're artists and lovers and, you know, like poets. Like we have all of that in our community, and we don't always get to practice it because we're struggling so often with poverty and basic needs. But we do hold this belief that community is valuable, and I would love to see us be able to assert that for ourselves and for our neighbors and communities.
I love that. You also mentioned your abuelita in your bio and how she has the best tamales this world has ever seen. And I bring this up because I know family is so important in our culture, and I know you do a lot for our culture, making sure we are represented correctly. So I want to know what all of this means to you and to be Latina.
That's a beautiful question. So cooking is how we show love in our family and many cultures. I know that's not unique, and that I mean, I do think she's passed away now, but I do think that she did make the best tamales, but I know everyone thinks that. In my case, it was true. But I would also say that, you know, families are tough. We had some of those same, I would say, traditional dynamics where, like, abuelita, she cared about how light-skinned you were. That was like important to her. She definitely valued her boys in a different way than she valued her daughter. And so I think we can uplift and celebrate those parts of our culture that are positive, and then also work on those parts that need a little pushing forward. And if she was still alive today, I think she wouldn't love to hear me say that. But it would be true, and I would do it. So I think to me, you know, I end up thinking about what it means to be Latina a lot because I run Latina Media Co., because I work at Esperanza United, which is a national organization working to mobilize Latino communities against gender-based violence, because of the type of articles I publish covering Latino media like Vivo. And I think our identity is really rooted in community. And so for me, it's about being a part of a community that I hope holds me accountable, and that I can help hold accountable, so that we can, you know, we can rise together, and that we can also hold hands with other communities of color. You know, there's a big debate about, are all Latinos people of color? Are some? Are they white? You know, there's sort of like this ongoing debate. And I think that's a really important conversation to have. But I also think that no matter how you look, we all should be organizing around folks who have less privilege and less power than us. And like, the darker skinned you are, the sadly worse you're often treated in our society. And so we need to do that work to sort of root out that racism and colorism, and also to uplift those voices and to celebrate the positive. You know, there's plenty of positive, there's plenty of work to do, but we're only going to get there if we do it together.
So before we end, we have some rapid fire questions. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
Yellow. It used to be green, but I changed. I'm a little more hopeful.
What is something you have been proud to say you have accomplished?
Getting paid to publish stuff. I have articles now. People pay me to write things. It's cool.
What is some advice that you wish you would have known when you were younger?
That you don't have to be a master to contribute, that it's okay to be not middling, but someone who has something to say, but not having to be the best or the most or the highest. I think that our society really values superlatives, and there's a whole bunch of other really important work that gets done outside of that space that's just incredibly valuable and incredibly important, and we need to say that too.
Describe yourself as a teenager in 3 words.
I want to say I was a nerd. But I was also social, like I had my own group of friends and things were good, and that I was ambitious. still ambitious.
If you could have 3 people dead or alive for dinner, who would it be?
Oh, 3 people. Well, I would definitely pick Toni Morrison. I feel like I've mentioned her, but she's my favorite. I would love to meet her. I'd love to meet Rigoberto Menchú, the activist, Guatemalan activist. I think she would be absolutely amazing. And then I guess I'm gonna go Frida Kahlo just to like round it out, like amazing women. I would love to, and also I would love to hear them talk amongst themselves. Can you imagine that conversation?
Yeah, that'd be great. What does success mean for you right now?
To me, success right now means doing work I love in a sustainable, effective way. So that means getting paid enough to like live and support my family and all of that. But it also means doing things that I value and that I think are important. But also doing them not so much that I'm killing myself, but that rather I'm maintaining that healthy, happy balance.
So what is a book that you have recently read or currently reading that you would recommend?
So I've been, because I'm a nerd, I've been reading a lot about Latinidad. And one book that I thought was really interesting was called, which I recently finished, was called Inventing Latinos. And it's about this idea of whether or not Latino is a race or is it an ethnicity or what does it mean and who are we as a group? She looked at the last census, so not the one that was released like a few days ago, but the one that was released 10 years ago. And in that census, you could only select, I believe, one race. And so something like 40% of Latinos checked other and then wrote in something versus like the majority of everybody else just picked one. And I definitely wrote in other. I wrote in even other on this one. But for this one, there's been all these headlines about how Latinos went from identifying as just white in huge numbers to identifying as mixed, because that's like a big part of our culture. Not everybody, but many people, myself amongst them, say like, okay, well, I know I have Spanish blood, I know I have indigenous blood, maybe I also have Black blood, you know, like people, that's part of it. And so I thought this book was just sort of fascinating to understand where our community was at. And also her thesis is that Latino is a race. Race is socially constructed, so it's mutable. But that's different than most of what you hear when you hear people talking about it. They always talk about how it's an ethnicity and not a race. And so I just thought it was a fascinating book to think about. I'm not sure that I agree, but I'm not sure that I disagree either. It's sort of been hanging around in the back of my brain and I've been mulling it over. So I would definitely say check it out. And it's a pretty fast read for like an academic nerd book.
Well, thank you so much, Cristina. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit down with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they could connect with you?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute joy. I so appreciate it. Folks the number one thing you should do is just go to latinamedia.co, like check it out, read the stories, follow us on social media. Latina Media Co is our handle on Twitter and Instagram. Those are the main ones we're active on. And so definitely do that. You can follow me at C Escobar Andrade, also on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find out sort of about all the things that I have coming up or have been doing, and the places I've been publishing.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much, Cristina. We really appreciate this.
Thank you.
So much.
Yes, thank you.